Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, my guest today is certainly one of those people, entertaining people who make up the world of shooting, Darryl Bolke. He's been on the podcast before, and he was the perfect guest to answer a viewer inquiry about hey guys, when you were cops way back in the age of dinosaurs, what was revolver training really like? So Darryl is the perfect guy to talk about that as part of American Fighting Revolver. They train folks and talk about revolvers a lot. So Darryl and I are going to have that chat. Before we do that, make sure you like and subscribe what we're doing here. That's how we can keep bringing it to you. And let's have a quick word with our great sponsor, Armasight, and then we'll talk to Darryl Bolke. Step up your game with Armasight's cutting-edge thermal and night vision binoculars. Built for hunters, tactical pros, and outdoor enthusiasts who demand clarity and reliability in any environment. Discover the performance and durability trusted by hunters and professionals worldwide. Gear up now at Armasight.com. Stop looking, start seeing. Well, hello there, Darryl.
Hey, Fred, how are you, buddy?
I am glorious, and hopefully you're the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Darryl, I got to admit, you're always glorious. I've said about you, you're kind of like Jimmy Buffett of the shooting world. You're a one-man spring break because you've always got a group around you. You're waving your arms and telling stories, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's good. I'm at I just turned 60 this week, and 60 and 40 were glorious. 50 and 30 were terrible, but right now, for being 60 years old, my life is good.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you joining us. You've been on before, but it was time that we had you back. And you are one of the guys behind AmericanFightingRevolver.com. That's your claim to fame in the world. You're you appreciate those things that have this little weird wheel that spin, and the guys today are like, "What? You only have 6 or 7 shots? What's up with that?" But I do feel like we are experiencing a new renaissance, a new appreciation for wheel guns, 6 guns, whatever you want to call them. And you guys, you and your buddy Brian have kind of led the charge with that with AmericanFightingRevolver.com. So we're going to talk about, actually, it was inspired by a viewer letter about the podcast, mentioned you specifically by name, and said, why don't you have Darryl on and you guys can talk about what it was like for police training or just revolver training in general back in the day when that was cutting edge. And I got to say, we started talking about it before we hit record. And I said, well, the first thing was you had to stick 38 casings in your ears if you were a wussy, because real men didn't need hearing protection, but us younger guys, we stuck those casings in our ears. It didn't protect your hearing, but at least you thought it did.
We were laughing too. I was talking to a couple of my old SWAT guys because we carried 45, so they put 40. I mean, they were big bore hearing protection, and doubling up was not plugs and external. It was a cigarette butt and then the 45 ACP round. So I was. I'm at a kind of a funny age where I got both that and electronic hearing pro. So, I've done kind of both ends of the spectrum.
And lest the younger people think we're joking, that's real. I've seen guys put cigarette butts, even cigar butts in their ears.
Oh, yeah. That was, like I said, that was the guys doubling up if we're running, flash bangs and all the stuff with it. You put some cigarette butts in there first. And, back when we actually had stun grenades as opposed to distraction devices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the day, and that's what we're going to talk about. And, that's why the official old shooter's handshake is, what?
Yeah.
So let's jump right into it. And, you're a trainer. You travel all over the country. You're a big fan of revolvers. You carried revolvers like I did. I was at the very tail end of that. What do you think the biggest single difference is, if you had to pin it, of revolver training today versus what we did when it was load, 6, and holster?
This all kind of came about with a podcast we recently did at AFR with Smith, and it's generated a lot of stuff. And I'm going to repeat the same thing that's going around the internet right now: deliberateness. You shot the guns deliberately. You pressed the trigger deliberately. You were screamed at literally from minute one by the academy instructors. And I was blessed. I wasn't really on the same page, and it's only because I came out of a bit of a different world of experience before I got to the academy, that if you couldn't get it done in 6 rounds, you were going to die. That was the mindset. You got to get it done in 6 or you are just going to absolutely die in the streets. And you got to get it done fast with the first one. Mm-hmm. So it was all around this whole level of trying to get it done in one. And, multiple engagement was, well, you can do 6 crooks. But it was really a high emphasis on marksmanship over everything else. And we were missing a couple of, the mindset was good too, in all honesty. Most cops of the era I started in were animals. I mean, they not in a bad way. The selection process was different. You went to the academy to get washed out. You didn't go to get through.
Right.
We washed 2/3 of my academy, 3/4, something like that. Can you imagine a police academy today where they wash 2/3 to 3/4 of the class?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unheard of. And then FDO training was the next step in seeing if we can get rid of you. So the people who got through were pretty tough. Of every size, gender, background, whatever, they were generally a fairly tough bunch to get through the whole process. So you had a little bit of a different mindset, and it was but like I said, the emphasis was very heavy on marksmanship mindset, and where I saw it really lacking was gun handling and tactics.
Yeah. But
the marksmanship, so we shot PPC type courses, so you're starting your qual at 50 yards. Mm-hmm. Right out of the gate, you're starting the qualification on a B-27 at 50. And then you're moving up through the stages. The time frames were not horrendously fast, but it was all about getting those hits, getting those scores. Moving on to the agency I went to work for, we qualified on B-27s. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. We qualified on B8s, not B-27. So the academy, we had the B-27s because it was a 50-yard range with all PPC. When I got to my agency, we qualified B8s, and we started at 25 yards. And
wow.
You were
Darryl, you guys were progressive.
Well, hold on. You were expected, and I mean truly expected, that you could park 6 rounds in the black and generally 10 or better at 25 yards on a B8. Now, The first qual was 6 rounds in 5 minutes. I did not make that really. Yes, you heard me right. 5 minutes. The reality was, though, go look at training today and who is holding people to basically 10 ring on a B8 at 25.
Yep.
We're trying to get them to hit paper at 25 at this. Well, most agencies aren't even using 25 because it's too hard.
Exactly.
And it's not reflective of real street shootings. Well, what are those? We don't really know. Yeah. So, you're sitting there with in that area, you're sitting there most likely with a revolver. If you happen to work for a place with a semi-auto, they weren't that good. I was in the cutting edge of SIGs and Berettas, coming into law enforcement and kind of the original Glock 17s. But the SIGs and the Berettas were incredibly accurate guns. But kind of prior to that, even the agencies around us, the couple that carried 45s, those were not really good 1911s for what we look at them today. You did not have guys running around with match fit barrels and bushings and sights and all that. They were generally kind of a retro-y Series 70 government.
Yeah.
And so the revolvers were quite capable of a lot of accuracy in almost any iteration that you had. And, and I was looked at as sort of that I carried a girl gun at my agency because I had a 4-inch 45 Colt, and most of the guys carried 6 inches.
That's great.
And the reasoning was funny. So our SWAT guys carried 4-inch guns because they had this holster somebody's side girlfriend had sewed onto their vest, and she used a 4-inch, so they all had those. And so the 4-inch guns were the SWAT gun because they fit in this holster on their vest. And the girls, and so I was the first guy carrying like an actual, I demoed the Rogers holsters and the Safariland 070, so I carried those my whole career. And they didn't make one for a 6-inch, so I carried a 4-inch because to me the retention holster was more important than, the barrel length and all that. But you had a lot of people shooting guns that you could really do exceptional accuracy work with. And that was really not the problem. I mean, marksmanship was a very seriously taken thing. If I had to bring up something different now, follow through is the other big one on how follow through is taught. So I was kind of there for the beginning of this trigger reset. Oh God, have we messed that up? I was
before you go down that road. Yeah, I want to unpack some of the stuff you said, because when Roy and I have talked about it in previous podcasts here, we've identified the whole focus on marksmanship and accuracy. And like you said, we kind of laugh now that, the 50-yard line, and I hated the 50-yard line, but you could shoot
hate the 50.
Yeah, but you could shoot single action. It was typically barricade, and you made it through. But there was, like you said, if you didn't get it done in 6, you were going to die. And we focused on loading, but I even came in right as speed loaders were becoming, the real high speed, low drag thing. But one thing you identified that I hadn't thought about, and you're absolutely correct, it's the emphasis on speed. We still did quick draw, actual quick draw, because they recognized through 100 years of gunfighting that you got to get the gun out and get it going. And that was a big emphasis, and guys practiced on that, even to the point our mirror in the police station had a bullet hole in it, as did many mirrors across the country. But that was something, I don't know of anybody nowadays who even mentions the word quick draw. And, they try to talk about deliberate presentations and all this stuff. But back then it was jerk that hog leg and go to work.
They do, but it's sort of weird. So here's a universal. And you know me, I'm a student of history of this. I spend my life researching the history of firearms conflicts and what we do. The reality is, first one with a significant hit generally wins.
Right.
A couple of significant hit has different indications for different people. With me, first guy in the orange or the grapefruit, first guy in the melon, same size target, wins. Generally the first one on that. Now here's the problem. You can be fast and not be able to hit that.
Right. Which
we have a lot of. Or you can be too slow and not hit that. There's a couple things, but the biggest problem I had, and Roy took me to my first shooting match. 21 years old, I'm out there shooting competitively. Roy was disturbingly fast compared to everybody else, and Roy was doing weird things that others weren't, like shooting a 3-inch speed 6. With fixed sight 3-inch speed 6, and everybody else is running 6-inch guns and stuff with adjustable sights.
Yeah.
Because Roy could get that, because he could clear leather faster, he could get on a flash sight picture faster, he could do all these things. I was coming out of that speed shooting world, but day one of firearms at the academy, first thing is 6 rounds at 3 yards. Yeah, great. I pull my 38 out and I drill 6 rounds in the X at 3 yards. And I see out of my peripheral vision, the red shirt is running towards me. And I think I'm kind of looking up and down the line, and I'm thinking he's going to come hand me a little medal or an award or something, because I've got 6 rounds planted in the X faster than anybody else on the line. And he is screaming at me, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Well, and he goes, "You can't use your sights. It's cheating." Now, It was one of the few times, because the academy I was in was a terrifying place. Full stress academy, and they hated you. It was, I had Marine drill instructors in my academy class going, this is the worst thing ever. And my brain said, well, cheating, isn't that the idea of winning this at all? I'm kind of on the whole cheating program.
Yeah.
But it was like, because I brought the gun up to eye level, like, you can't possibly do that. And talking to Pat Rogers, Pat had the same experience in New York, 10 years before this. It was always the same thing. The guys who shot competitively, who are really up on this, know you bring the gun into your eye line. Right. It's really all Weaver really is. On a little sidetrack, Weaver is a flash front sight picture, 2 hands isometric tension on the gun. That's all Weaver is. It's not a stance. The whole key to Weaver was that flash front sight picture of bringing the gun into your eye line. And I got just eviscerated. So I had to start. You pushed on the earth, didn't you? Yes, I had to start doing. So we couldn't bring the gun to the eye line till we got to 7 yards.
Right.
So at 3 and 5, you're shooting everything from the shoulder point, unsighted, unverified fire thing, which falls apart horrifically on the street. I don't care what anybody tells you. No, you're not all Jelly Bryce. Very few people have really mastered that, especially when you're moving and the target are both moving. It doesn't work. I evaluated all the shootings at my agency, and I found that outside of contact, or the distance you could touch your opponent, anything that was unverified, meaning gun in the eye line, was a miss. So we threw that completely out of the program, short of retention shooting. So that was sort of part of the problem, but they wanted you to be really fast. So you had this sort of draw stroke that was fast to get those initial rounds off. So we were really accurate and deliberate at 7 yards and out, and then in close we tended to be very fast. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing was trying to kind of mesh that together of being fast and accurate and close, because immediately after leaving the academy, I'm back to doing what I know is supposed to be done, Yeah. But you were fighting some training stuff, and a lot of that was well, that's how we've always done it. Well, and that goes, and I'll tell you when that goes back to. It goes back to the 1920s when you had a M&P 38 revolver. How did you use the sights in close? Because the reality was you couldn't see the sights because the hammer blocked it on those old guns.
Yeah.
So in double action, you shot without sights, and then when you were at a distance, you could use the sights you cocked the gun. Well, that just held over for about 50 years too long. That's how we've always done it, which is why you have some issues. But the reality was, if you could get on sights fast, you were good, but the trigger press was super deliberate.
Well, you raise an interesting point I never thought about. Today, we've got a lot of guys coming out of, it's our longest war ever, but guys that have been putting rounds down range, and there's always the argument of doing what they did, does that translate to law enforcement on the street, or self-defense, which I would argue it does in a lot of cases. But, back when we were going through the academy and all that, and our academy was the exact same way. It was straight out of Full Metal Jacket. And, we called our senior drill instructor Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, and that was the way it was. But I valued that now versus the unisex bathroom crap that they're doing. But anyway, I find it curious that at that point, we never heard from guys that had, because all these guys a lot of them had military experience in Vietnam and had really been in the deep kimchi, but you never heard them talking about what they learned there. So it was all kind of the on the street stuff and SWAT. You heard a lot about SWAT because they were kind of the only people shooting people at that point. Whereas now, almost everything we do, private, military, or private law enforcement, kind of all goes back to experiences from the sandbox. Or am I not seeing that right?
No,
what do you think?
I think we have a bit of a fascination with all things special operations.
Yeah.
The reality is most of the guys overseas through the global wars on terrorism and all that, most of those guys did not shoot pistols.
Right.
Period. The guys who shot pistols were your special operations guys, and the reality is they didn't shoot a lot of pistols unless maybe night vision with a suppressed whatever. You know what I mean? It wasn't pistol. If those guys are down to their pistols with what they carry, something's horribly wrong. So the problem is there's very little parallels. Brian just broke the internet the other day that we got all these cops who can tell you every piece of gear that SEAL Team 6 carries, but they can't get them to try to talk about case law or court testimony, and they don't know what you're talking about. So we live in a different world with what cops do versus then. And I was the first person at my agency recruited off a college campus. I was surrounded. All of my mentors, all of these old guys that I was getting info from and kind of inspired by and were kind of taken under a wing, most of them were Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
In that era of law enforcement. I mean, we got through the 70s because most of those cops had come home from Vietnam and went to work as cops. They were tough. They were hard, tough people. Most people don't realize how bad the 60s were.
Yeah.
Murder rates and shootings and ratios of cops to bad guys and stuff. We got through that because the cops were hard.
Yeah. And
those Vietnam vet supervisors were Korean War vets. I mean, I even had a couple of those at work. I mean, they were all like lieutenants and stuff, but the old, Santa-looking lieutenant was, but so it was a different sort of mindset, but you really never heard reflective because I think most of them could figure out my M16 in Vietnam or my M14 is not relative to this blue steel revolver and a Remington 870.
Yep.
There's really little relevance. The urban environment versus jungles in Vietnam. A lot of it, I think people realize this doesn't really cross over. And the military of those eras were heavyweight in bullseye known distance shooting.
Right.
You went to the range and shot bullseye with your 1911, and you shot KD, known distance range stuff with your 16. So even those guys were sort of heavy on the accuracy program versus heavy on the how fast. The cops were the guys who were fast shooters.
Yeah.
Is the reality of that. Those were the guys who were fast. If you look at some of the holster designs of the day, some of the stuff the guys were doing, a lot of these guys were fast. And I'll steal a quote from Scotty Reitz, and they didn't have television. In that, it's like, Bill Jordan didn't watch TV. Or
the tube.
They're out fast draw and they're loading their own ammo, and a lot of those guys were ungodly fast. And especially now that I live in between moving to Texas and Oklahoma, some real legends out here. In Oklahoma, all you got to do is, whisper that Dan Combs, all these guys are it's all about some of these legendary speed shooting cops. And that was sort of the emphasis in the academies back then is who's fast. But the guys who were fast could also shoot, the rest of the qual corps from 7 to 50 yards. You had to be accurate.
Yeah.
So these guys all tended to be accurate and then fast, if that makes sense. I mean, it went from as soon as you got that 5 and 3 yard, it was all about who could get it out the fastest.
Yep. Well, and I was going to unpack that part of it, the tactics. I don't think I ever heard tactics really mentioned until the early 90s. It was really draw fast, shoot accurately, stand toe-to-toe until somebody goes down. And then we started talking about crazy stuff like moving, communicating, cover, concealment. And some of that got mentioned, but they really started to appreciate it by the 90s, for sure, the late 80s. So, I'm journeying down my own memory lane as you're talking, thinking about, standing there and there was if there was any positional shooting at all, it was kneeling. But other than that, and there was certainly no moving. There was none of the stupid human tricks we like to talk about. It was just, we were tough guys. You stand, you pull your gun, go to shooting, and hopefully you were faster and more accurate than the guy downrange. And that was pretty much firearms.
And, you had some environmental things. We talked a little beforehand. I was walking into San Bernardino County right after the Norco bank robbery. For those watching this, if you don't know what that is, Google it. And then I had been just coming out of San Diego after the Sagan Pen incident, which really took cover and contact and cover. Was all of a sudden, that's what it was all about. That incident in SoCal was kind of a trigger on that. Yeah. I even talk about like backup guns. Even our terrible cops carried backups, onion field. So we had sort of some of these really significant incidents that would drive a lot of the training and emphasis. And I was at a pretty good time kind of coming off of that post-Sagan Pen, post-Norco bank robbery, all of that, and then getting right into the academy at that time. And I knew all the right people to get all the info on that stuff. Yeah. So it put me a little ahead of the curve, but I was at the tail end of the revolver world.
Yeah. So as we're winding down here, obviously, we've talked about it before. Hit rates have gone down. Average number of shots fired has gone up. And we tend to identify that as the byproduct of, well, I've got 21 rounds. I might as well expend a few of them. But there doesn't seem to be the emphasis on accuracy. So talk about, in this modern day, if somebody doesn't choose to carry a revolver, I get it. I don't carry, well, that's not true. I've started carrying a revolver a lot in my right front pocket, but sometimes I still grab the semi-auto. But I get why people don't want to carry them. But yet there's that blending of understanding you've only got a few shots, so you better be good with them, versus I got a whole bunch of shots and a spare magazine. How do we get to the point where people understand that it's great to have all that extra ammo, but you really got to do some good work with that first couple, because the rest of them probably aren't going to matter.
I used to have this kind of big brain way I would describe this is that high capacity semi-automatic pistols simply allow you to stay in a fight longer with less manipulations on the gun. That's it. That's their big benefit, is you can stay in a fight longer with less manipulations. They don't change anything else. They don't change that you've got to get that thing in your eye line. You've got to use some sort of visual verification on the gun. You've got to get a clean trigger press. You've got to use the fundamentals of marksman. None of that changes. Those are truly the fundamentals. The only thing that changes is you are a little bit locked in with the auto, that you have to have a good grip, because grip drives that gun. Recoil drives the gun. With a revolver, it doesn't matter how you hold the thing, as long as you can get the trigger to move, the gun will go bang. Outside of that, the semi-auto just lets you stay in a fight with less manipulations on the gun, and those manipulations tend to be a little bit easier. It's easier to put a great big magazine into a hole than 6 jiggling things into 6 precision fit holes. It's just easier. So as long as you're hitting significantly with the initial loads in the gun, I don't find that there's a lot of difference. And I would actually throw the advantage to the revolver, because it is not dependent on your grip driving the gun. They tend to be much more reliable shot in space. Just watch the body cam videos when these crap grips on the gun and inside of a car are leaning around, and no good grip, no skeletal lock. We stopped teaching Weaver, so they're not isometrically locking the gun. They need bone structure. They don't get that structure, because my answer of isosceles versus Weaver is yes. You need to be able to shoot both of them for the situation.
Yep.
So the revolver on the first few rounds in typical engagements, I find to be superior in that they tend not to malfunction then.
Yeah.
Or not go bang or stop themselves. As soon as we run them out of ammo, the nod goes to the auto, because you require less manipulations on the gun to keep it in a fight.
Yep.
Well, how important is that? This is simply just understanding problem solving and the tool that you have in your hand when you're solving the problem.
Exactly. And that's something that Roy and I always try to hit on is, what's the best gun? the one you can hit with, the one you can work and manipulate. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're competent with it, it'll be fine for the purposes we're talking about. But, I was thinking something as you were talking that I think I've come up with a pretty good metaphor. I'm a new motorcycle rider. We've talked about that before. I'm in my second year now. What I've discovered riding motorcycles, and I just bought my second motorcycle, so I've got it bad. I've had a lot of driver training. I've had professional driver training several places, including some names you would know. I've been blessed to do that. I drove around for 30 years every single day. So I think I'm a pretty fair driver, knock on wood. Mm-hmm. But being on a motorcycle makes me appreciate and makes me a better driver in my car for the simple fact of stuff like head checking. You have to do that on a motorcycle or you'll get smashed. And I find myself in my car now, I'm reminding myself of those fundamentals. So when I'm on the interstate driving down in my car, I head check instead of not. And I check my mirrors, even when I'm slowing down to make sure somebody's not running up on me. So I think being a motorcyclist has definitely made me a safer driver in the car. And what I'm learning now is Darryl has completely convinced me to carry that J-frame in my pocket to the point I went someplace the other day I really wasn't supposed to have it. And I realized after I was in that, well, I've got a 38 in my pocket. It worked out okay. Everything was fine. Nobody needs to have their hair catch on fire. But that really reminded me of how comfortable it was for me to carry this. So anyway, my point being, the greater point, the more I'm shooting revolvers a lot more now because of you, Darryl. And I think it makes me a better shooter when I pick up the semi. So
I tell people, if you can master a double action trigger, you can shoot anything. I mean, people a lot of times like, well, I'm not really into revolvers. I don't want to. I go, you know what? Get a revolver and load it up with nothing but snap caps. And there's your dry practice gun.
Yep.
If nothing else, you're not damaging the ammo, unloading and loading your semi-auto. It will teach you how to press a trigger correctly. It will teach you to get that feeling, develop those neural pathways, the whole thing. It's like follow through I was kind of getting on, instead of going click, bang, we use that for kindergarten training of reset, not for everything. You're supposed to graduate from that. These things will force you all the way off, all the way on, all the way off, all the way on. A lot of these things you'll develop, if nothing else, you can develop into a better, technical shooter. I also find that it keeps my skills up for a guy who doesn't shoot like I used to. Mm-hmm. I don't have a taxpayer base now supplying me with my 250 rounds a night shooting thing that I used to do.
Yeah.
And my wife will tell you, I've always got a revolver sitting in front of me watching TV, doing whatever. I'm constantly on it's loaded with snap caps. I mean, I just sit here and work triggers and manipulations, and I find that I don't need, that I can pick a semi-auto up and generally shoot them pretty well without shooting them all the time because I spend so much time on the wheel guns. And it's mainly because I train, it's funny, my current job, I carry a revolver at work because I can. And I'm working a job, I'm around cows and horses and rodeo stuff and that, so I can do that. But the reality is, because I do it so much, that's kind of what I carry now. But, if I'm going into town or something and I throw a semi-automatic pistol on, it doesn't hurt me that I've spent a lot of time on revolver training. Now, that doesn't go back the other direction, if that makes sense. If all you've ever pressed is I couldn't possibly own, a polymer striker fired pistol that I didn't have an action job done on because that 4-pound trigger is so hard that, start working 12 and 14s. It's why I like 22 revolvers to train with.
Yeah.
I get no recoil impulse, and all I'm doing is I am got to press a 14-pound trigger. That will make you a better shooter. I can tell you, having been in multiple shootings with different platforms, I never remember what the trigger felt like. I just remember it moving. I challenge you in the middle. Could you tell the difference between 3.5 and 4.5 when it's for real? So we've kind of handicapped ourselves with everybody tells me, oh, the autos are so much easier to shoot. Name me something that we train on to be good that easier is better.
Excellent.
Excellent point. I'm a power lifter because I'm using the little pink aerobics weights, but it's so much easier doing bench press with these than real big boy dumbbells, know. And it's kind of the same thing. If you're working a heavy, hard trigger all the time, then pressing the light ones is pretty easy.
Exactly.
Without moving the gun.
Yep. And it goes back to this whole thing of people want the equipment to make up for their lack of skill. And we all know what that gets you. So excellent points, Darryl. I could talk to you all day about this, but we need to wrap it up. But first, AmericanFightingRevolver.com. What the heck is that?
So that's mine and Brian Eastridge's company. It's a mixed media. It's sort of a visual magazine, but we got articles and references to old revolvers, new revolvers. We do Wheel Gun Wednesday, which is a video. Brian does Maintenance Mondays, which are kind of how to work on and clean and do some stuff with the guns. Those are all videos I will post, or both will post articles, we'll post references. But we have got some of the coolest revolver content on the planet. We also do quite a bit of consulting now. We're working with most of the major manufacturers at a different level than most. People go, God, they're coming out with some cool revolvers. You're welcome. That we finally kind of got the door kicked into, why don't you have some people who do this all the time help tell you what products to build? And so we do a lot of consulting. We do some training. We got our big revolver events. So we're hosting the two biggest events in the country, Revolver Fest in South Carolina in October and the Pat Rogers Memorial Revolver Roundup at Gunsight in November. So those are both ours. I'm actually going to be at Girl and Guns National Conference doing revolver stuff again this year. So we do a lot of training stuff, but most of it is that, for $5 a month, you got a lot of great video content. We call it a magazine you can watch. So
perfect. Well, and I got to say that, like you said, Revolver Fest will be coming up. You'll probably hear more about that at FMG Publications.
I heard we got a great media sponsor.
Yes, you do. That's not official yet. But yes. But and the other thing is, I will challenge our audience, which is ginormous and absolutely loves revolvers. If you'd like to see Darryl on more frequently, shall we say, leave us a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or drop me a line if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. And if you would like to see Darryl and or possibly Brian, I would like to. So let the audience speak. So make sure you let us know that. But Darryl Bolke, AmericanFightingRevolver.com. I'll put a link down in the description so folks can come over and check out your stuff. But I appreciate you joining us, and We'll get together because you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to those funny things that have those little spinny things in them.
Yep. And, I just got to throw a shout out to Roy Huntington. This is where we're at. When I was 21, Roy used to call me Tack because all I wanted was semi-auto black plastic Velcro things, and here we are. So the world does go round. I became Roy in my old age.
I can think of worse things.
Worse things. I love them to death. Yep.
Well, thanks again, Darryl.
All right.
Had a great time talking to Darryl Bolke, and hopefully our chat gave you a better insight about what it was like to learn to shoot revolvers back in the dinosaur ages when we went to the police academy. Before we go, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Of course, please like and subscribe. That's the best way you can help us keep bringing you great content for free here at FMG Publications, so make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. Also, make sure you check out our sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com and AmericanCop.com. It's not just for law enforcement officers, it's for folks who want to be prepared, normal Earth people, in an uncertain world. And if you want to buy subscriptions to our magazines or any of our special interest publications, you can do that at fmgpubs.com. If you want to get a copy of Roy Huntington's Insider book or John Connor's Odd Angry Shot, or like I said, subscribe to either magazine, that's fmgpubs.com. And of course, our great sponsor, Armasight. Step up your game with Armasight's cutting-edge thermal and night vision monoculars. Stop looking, start seeing. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody who works so hard here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat reminding you for another week, now get out there and get shooting.